All right, thanks everybody. I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar on AI tools for law faculty. I'm Jim Greif. I'm the Executive Communications Officer at the Association of American Law Schools, and it's a great pleasure to have you all here with us. We're thrilled to see such strong interest in our second webinar in our year-long series on AI. As many of you know, AALS is partnering with West Academic on several initiatives related to AI, and this series is one of the projects that we're excited for. We may not know all the ways that AI will reshape legal education, but we know it will. And this series is part of our efforts to help you stay informed and build our collective understanding of artificial intelligence as we continue to work to advance excellence in legal education. I want to remind you that AALS has 108 sections, including one on technology, law, and legal education, which has active membership and ongoing work in this area. There are many ways to get involved, and we hope to see many of you at our events in the future. I'll post some information about our upcoming meetings and sections in the chat. I want to thank Michael Hunter Schwartz from the University of Pacific McGeorge School of Law, who is serving as our moderator today. You'll hear from him shortly. I'm grateful for his leadership on teaching and pedagogy and for the experience of the panelists he brought together today. And finally, I want to extend a special thanks to Megan Putler from West Academic. She's here to share a few words. And I also want to express my appreciation for everything she and her team are doing to support the Legal Academy. Megan, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, James. And good afternoon, everyone. I'll echo James here and say thank you all for joining us once again during what I'm sure is an extremely busy tail end of your semester. As James said, my name is Megan Putler, and I'm the Director of Learning and Instruction for Law School Curriculum here at West and Barbary. And I'm here representing West Academic, who is one of the co-sponsors for this webinar series, alongside our good friends at AALS. We're so grateful for AALS for their partnership and leadership in creating this space for thoughtful and faculty-centered conversations around AI and legal education. Here at West, we see our role as supporting legal educators with resources and conversations that reflect how legal ed is evolving in practice. And in our daily work with authors and faculty partners, we hear again and again that AI is top of mind, but that many professors are still figuring out how to understand it well enough to teach with confidence. There's a real uncertainty about where to start, what matters most for students, and how to stay grounded while the tech is constantly changing around us. So helping to ease that knowledge gap is really a big part of why we here at West are so excited to be part of this series. We know that teaching in an environment where students may be learning these tools just as quickly, or if not more quickly than we are, can be really challenging. And yet here we all are navigating that reality together. So I'm especially interested to hear from our panelists today about how they're approaching these questions in real time. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn things over to our session moderator, Michael Hunter Schwartz. So thank you all again for being here, and we hope you enjoy today's session. Take it away, Michael.
Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Here's a quick overview. I'm going to do incredibly brief remarks. I'm going to do equally brief biographies for our incredible panel. They're going to each talk for about 10 to 15 minutes in the order of Professor Alexandria Serra, then Professor Jack Graves, and then Professor Tracy Norton. So here are my brief remarks, and then we'll open it up to your questions. And if you don't have any questions, I promise to have some just in case. So my brief remarks. As you will learn today, AI is already being used to improve student learning and in meaningful ways. And after spending time with these panelists, I want to say that as sort of a member of the toe in the water crowd, I'm actually really excited. You will hear from people who are way beyond toe in the water. They are very far along in their development, and I want you to sort of do what I'm going to be doing, which is listening for things that confuse you. And please be ready to ask questions when they're done. I also want to invite you to do what I'm going to try to do, which is to resist, to avoid being resistant and try to adopt a learner mindset. Let's see what we can learn today to better serve our students. So Alexandria Serra is a visiting assistant professor and former advocacy fellow at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law, where she teaches trial ad, appellate advocacy, and law practice management and coaches in the nationally ranked mock trial program. Her research focuses on artificial intelligence, of course, litigation, and technology's impact on constitutional criminal procedure. She is the author of numerous practitioner-focused guidebooks on AI use and has built over 15 custom AI tools for legal education and advocacy training. She trains litigators and public defenders nationwide on AI integration in legal practice. She holds a JD MBA and joins the University of San Francisco School of Law as a tenure track professor this fall. Jack Graves enjoys the digital cutting edge of legal education, taking his teaching online long before COVID, successfully launching the Turo FlexTime JD program, and currently teaching in the Syracuse JD Interactive online program. He also began teaching students to leverage technology in law practice long before the recent arrival of generative AI. Today, he is enthusiastically exploring AI use on two distinct fronts. One, how can we as individual educators use AI to improve student learning and course outcomes? And two, how will our students as future lawyers use AI to better serve an even more diverse range of clients? And then finally, Tracy Norton is assistant professor of law at LSU Law Center, where she teaches legal analysis and communication, as well as professional responsibility. She is a co-creator of the Law Profs Gen AI Sandbox. That is lawprofsaisandbox.org, with Susan Tanner of Louisville Brandeis, Will Monroe of LSU Law, Amy Pittman of Maryland Carey, and Sean Harrington of ASU Law. This initiative provides interactive AI resources for legal educators and administrators. Professors Norton and Tanner have developed several frameworks grounded in rhetorical theory and the neuroscience of learning that foster responsible AI use in legal education and law practice. Tracy's current scholarship addresses the opportunities Gen AI has presented to enhance the human side of legal education and law practice. She will demo the sandbox and its tools. Alexandria?
Thank you so much. All right, give me a thumbs up on slides. We're seeing them. Fantastic. So I have the next 15 minutes to convince all of you to use AI in your advocacy skills courses and clinics. So I always like to start with a question. How many reps does it take for students to be able to respond appropriately to an evidentiary objection? Or how about to do a cross-examination without asking an open-ended question? Or a concise, well-reasoned argument in front of a judge? Usually when I give this presentation, somebody raises their hand and says, oh, so many reps. And that's true. And it depends on the student. But what if there was a way that we could give students unlimited reps? As Mike said, I'm Alexandria Serra, visiting assistant professor at UMKC. And over the past 2 years, I've built 15 custom tools to address this problem. And I had zero coding experience to do it. So let's start with the origin story. When you're defining a use case, and what I mean by a use case is how you're going to use this technology to help legal education, we've got to look at the gaps. So for me as a clinical professor, they were fourfold. Faculty time. When we're talking about coaching teams or developing trial advocacy or appellate advocacy skills, we can't provide that unlimited sparring. There's so many hours in the day, we're teaching classes, we're doing all of these things. Also, if you've ever coached a team or helped out in a clinic, students draft their skills. So they draft a direct examination, and sometimes they just get married to those skills and aren't listening for those golden nuggets that you get from witnesses in the wild. Third, resources are expensive, right? Who wants to work more hours for the same pay or constantly be asking for volunteers? And finally, as I mentioned, if you guys have practiced at all, you know the wild is very different than anything that we teach in law school. So after we've identified the gaps, my next step was to develop something that students could use to practice these skills. So how do we make practice unlimited? Well, focusing on three areas, and I encourage you to think about this as well. Accessibility. How do we provide students something that is accessible 24/7, 365? We all have learners that maybe this is their second career, or they have children at home, or they're logging in at 11 p.m. Well, we're not available at that time, but AI is. Second, repetition. For some students, they get it within 10 tries. Others, it might take 50. So how do we provide those students that repetition to where they can practice over and over again to get comfortable with skills? And third, scale. For us, right, we serve 10, 20, 30, 100 students at a time. So what can we do to develop that? So today I'm going to talk about 4 use cases, and the best way to talk about use cases is to show them to you. So it will be clinics, evidentiary practice, client counseling, and moot court. So here's one of the tools that I built used in oral advocacy form.
Hey, coach, I'd like to start direct examination practice.
Welcome to direct examination practice. I'm excited to help you out. You'll be guiding a witness through questions as you would in a family law case. If your question violates the federal rules of evidence, I'll jump in with an objection just like opposing counsel would. Then you can respond as an advocate and I'll rule on it as a judge might. You can ask as many questions as you like and just let me know when you're done for some feedback. Let's go ahead and get started.
What's that fact pattern?
Absolutely. Let me set the stage for you. For today's scenario, let's imagine you're representing a mother named Sarah in a custody hearing. The main issue is determining the best custodial arrangement for her 8-year-old daughter. You'll be questioning Sarah on the stand to establish her relationship with her daughter and her ability to provide a stable environment. So go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Sarah. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Morgan. I'm the mother of Emily, who's 8 years old, and I'm here today to talk about our situation.
Sarah, who's the father of little Emily?
The father of Emily is my ex-husband, Jason. We've been divorced for about 2 years now.
Okay, so in that simulation, the GPT or chatbot that I'm engaging with is creating the fact pattern, playing the witness. We didn't get to the objections because I have a very short amount of time, but would object as opposing counsel and then play the judge to rule on objections. Did I endlessly code 100 fact patterns? Absolutely not. That is the beauty of AI. It can provide that fact pattern and spar with you in that environment. So what if you want to practice evidentiary objections? Let's try this tool.
Chat, let's start an objection drill on a basic level. Let's make it a criminal case.
Absolutely, let's get started. First, let's set the scene. What's the type of crime and what's a brief summary of what happened? That way we can customize the context of the drill.
Let's do a robbery, and we're doing a direct examination of a bystander inside the gas station that was robbed.
Great, we're set. This is a criminal robbery case, and I'll be asking the bystander questions on direct examination. We're at the basic level, so feel free to object or say no objection. Let's begin. Question 1. What did you see when you were inside the gas station that evening?
No objection.
Now, you might be saying in real court, we don't stand up and say no objection. And that's true, right? AI simulations are imperfect. But this particular student sparred and sparred with that evidentiary tool until she was done. And then now we'll get feedback. So as you can see from the first 2 simulations, the AI can create the fact pattern, or the student can provide the fact pattern to the AI, and it is seamless integration. So let's talk about feedback.
Chat, can you give me some feedback on the objection drill that we just ran together?
You did well identifying a couple of key objections. You caught the leading question in the hearsay issue. That shows you're mindful of question form and out-of-court statements. One missed opportunity was when you allowed broad narrative testimony to proceed without checking relevance or scope, but in a short drill, that's easy to overlook. Keep focusing on the purpose of each question. Overall, you're on the right track. Just sharpen your radar on relevance and speculation.
Understood. How do you think I'm going to do on my evidence final?
I can't predict exact outcomes, but I can tell you that practicing like this, spotting issues, stating objections, and thinking under pressure is exactly what builds your confidence and accuracy.
The more you practice and refine your reasoning, the better prepared you'll be.
So that's one of those things that, like, oh my gosh, AI, guardrails, saying something wrong. Yes, that is definitely a fear. But when you are training your personalized tool, as you test it, you're going to be able to create those guardrails. So when the student asks, am I going to get a good grade on my evidence final? The tool knows to be like, I can't predict the future, but keep going. So I've shown you a couple examples of these students engaging orally with the tool. Well, what about just text? Just like using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini in the wild that you may do right now, you can use these tools just typing as well. And the great thing about creating your own custom teaching assistant or skills-based chatbot is that you can make it adaptive. And so this evidence expert is going to go through and do the objection drill again, as I'm showing in the video. But here you can have it set to basic, intermediate, or advanced. You can train your tool to say, okay, if the student gets the first 6 questions right, then we move them to the intermediate chat. Basic is just objection, no objection. Intermediate is when the student objects and then opposing counsel, the AI plays opposing counsel and spits back a response to a hearsay objection, and the student has to battle it out. The advanced setting is where the student and the AI spar it out with multi-layer objections, maybe some evidentiary foundation, etc. And so that's an example of what we have here. And students can share their audio recording or their chat transcript with a teacher at any point in time as a conversation tool. So let's talk about what happens when AI gets it wrong, because I get that question a lot too. And for those of you who have practiced, you know that judges do in fact get it wrong. Hate to break it to you. So this teaches students to be able to be in the wild and adapt. It's a conversation starter of, well, why didn't the judge sustain that objection? Was it in my response to that? Was it that the AI just got it wrong? Let's talk through it. And sometimes even in class, I pull up the back end of these tools and walk the students through how to retrain them in real time, promoting that literacy. So here's one for client counseling.
Chat, start the simulated live interview.
Hi there. Thanks for meeting with me. I'm the CTO at Mensana LLC. We're a small video game development company. Been around about a year. Right now, we're figuring out how we handle intellectual property, especially with our team and contractors. I'm here to get your advice on that. What would you like to know from me?
Understood. Thanks for laying that groundwork. Do you own everything that went into building your game, like the code, art, and the music?
So the core game code is ours. Our internal team built that. But some art and music came from freelancers. We don't have a written policy yet, just individual agreements. So I'm not 100% sure we've buttoned it all up cleanly.
So that particular tool, the client counseling tool, was created so that a final deliverable of a client memo requires the student to go back and forth with the tool to get the relevant information for that. So multi-layer different types of skills that a professor created that tool for. And finally, this one's my favorite because it addresses the 1L oral argument. And so if you are a clinical professor that teaches first year writing, for example, you know that students get up for their first oral argument and they're shaking at the podium and they're really nervous. What if there was a way to stop that, or at least make them feel more confident about their argument? So here's an example of what I built for our first year problem.
This honorable court calls the case of Fan Hung, individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated, plaintiff versus Metromaid Inc., defendant, in the Western District Court of Missouri. Announcements of counsel.
Your Honor, my name is Emma Piazza and I represent the defendant Metromaid.
You may proceed, counsel.
This court should deny Fan Hung's motion for class certification because the proposed class does not meet the requirements of predominance or superiority.
Counsel, let me interrupt briefly. You assert that predominance is not satisfied, yet the plaintiffs argue that Metromaid's knowledge of Tony Smith's ownership and practices is a common question across all class members. How do you address their claim that this knowledge can be established with class-wide evidence, such as the similar contracts and policies.
All right, I'm going to cut that one short because I'm running out of time. But the student, again, can spar. It's interrupted by the chatbot and can practice in a simulated environment. So what are our students saying? Well, this is coming in three basic categories. The first is, "You're the coolest, Professor Sarah. I can't believe you're doing this." The second type of feedback we're getting is that it's a great supplement to teaching, things that you can't do in class with the constraints of class time. And the third category is my favorite because it is reducing the anxiety around things like oral argument. There are so many folks that aren't going to be litigators, that aren't going to be in a courtroom, and aren't going to be in front of a panel of judges. And so anything we can do as educators to give them that practice is invaluable. And hot off the presses from yesterday, one of my students said that it's more adaptable and realistic than any other study tool available. So this is the kind of impact that you can have in a matter of hours. So that's what you can do. How do you do it? It's a thing called vibe coding, or creating a tool without actually coding, talking in natural language prompts, right? And what I mean by natural language prompts is just talking to it like you were talking to a human being. So there's 4 steps to vibe coding, and I know my co-presenters will chat about this a little more later, but you identify the skills gap, as we talked about earlier. You collect your materials, so your examples, your pedagogy, your books, your slides. You spend about 45 minutes to an hour building and testing. You deploy it, and then you test and iterate. And so if any of y'all offline want to meet with me or have a Zoom and I can show you how to do it, I know Jack is going to do some of this as well, but that's vibe coding. So you can do it with pretty much any of these systems of your choice. And so what have I built? Well, in addition to what I showed you, I built a simulated expert to spar with. I've built a judge's tool to discuss and analyze cross motions for summary judgment in the state of Colorado. I've built a tool that helps students practice the Socratic method and so many more. So I will leave you with a question just like I started. What if you could multiply your impact without multiplying your workload? AI can do that for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexandria. Jack, you're up next.
All right, can everybody see my slides and hear me? Okay, great. So like Alexandria, I'm going to propose that we consider solving an old problem with a new tool. The difference is Alexandria has been talking to you about practical skills courses. I'm going to take you on a tour of using a new tool in a doctrinal setting. So get my clicker. The problem is that students often need more course-specific interactive support than current available resources allow. This is because we try to give this support with humans, and human support inherently comes with a problem of scale. We can't give enough. I encountered this when I was in law school, when I was a teaching assistant to my contracts professor, and the fact is, students needed more than we can provide. The reason this matters is because more engagement, more practice, and more quality feedback, we know this leads to greater applied mastery. The problem is we don't have enough resources to do this for everyone who needs it, at least not when we employ humans. Well, what often inadequately fills the gap? 1, generic study aids. Everyone who teaches doctrinal courses complains about the students' use, often against the professor's advice, of generic study aids, which may not focus on course issues that the professor does, may handle them differently, and may be flat out wrong, not to mention old student outlines, and more recently. Most of you probably realize this now. If you don't, Your students, if you teach a doctrinal course, are using generic generative AI as an attempt at having a suitable study aid. Not that it works very well, but when that's all that's out there, they're going to use it. So what's the solution? I call this my contracts coach. People might call it a tutor bot, a study bot. I first built an evidence coach last fall. I'm currently working with my contracts coach, so I'll talk about that one today. But it's essentially, it's a 24/7 course-specific interactive study partner. It's built as a private custom GPT. In this case, I agree with Alexandra. A lot of this stuff can be done on, is platform neutral. This particular use case works far better on OpenAI's custom GPT than anything else. I'll show you a quick image of it shortly. The idea of a custom GPT is that the responses of the AI are guided by your detailed instructions, providing direction and guardrails, and grounded in your own curated course materials, providing the doctrinal substance for the AI to use. This isn't a generic LLM. It uses a generic LLM, but it's not a generic LLM because it's narrowly tailored for your specific course. And it won't replace effective teaching, office hours, or student groups, or study groups. But it will effectively supplement all three, and it does it at scale. That's the beauty. This works at scale. It's always on, it's always available, and it can service as many students as want to use it at any given time. Now, the key to this course-specific grounding is something called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. It's a mouthful, so we just call it RAG, but it's important to know what that means. There are two attributes of RAG that we care about here: access and priority. If we think about an LLM, many of us have a general idea that the LLM answers questions by reference to its generic stored knowledge, its training data. Much of that, in many cases, that training data won't have access to the curated materials you want the contracts coach to rely on. It also doesn't know to give priority to your materials over its general training data. So what the RAG level does is it does two things. One, it makes sure that the LLM has access to everything it needs, even if it was otherwise hidden behind a firewall, and it knows to give priority to your materials, provided they address the issue in question. So RAG gives priority to your curated materials. If the answer isn't in your materials, it uses its general knowledge. So let me shift gears here quickly to give you an example. Here is a very, very simple custom GPT. And what I've got, the display I've got gives you on the left the controls. This is how you build it. And on the right, we've got a preview of what the student would see with one answer I've already got set up. The instructions here are really simple. All the instructions do is say, answer the questions based on a hierarchy. Look at my uploaded materials first, and if you can answer it there, tell me you did so, and tell me what you used. And if you can't, answer it from your own general training data. So very, very simple. By the way, you can use up to 8,000 characters of this, and you probably do in building a comprehensive instructional set. But this is simple. I then uploaded two documents that each has a couple of lines on it: a color preference upload and a food preference upload, so that the AI has those preferences. Again, we're going to keep it really simple. Now, with those uploads, what I asked my GPT first is, what's your favorite language? And actually, I got an interest in LLMs are probabilistic, so you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it tells me Python. Sometimes it tells me English. I've had it a few times tell me Spanish. This time it said, well, maybe Python, JavaScript, English, Spanish, maybe more. The point is, it didn't really want to make up its mind because it's relying on its own general data set. Now, let's quickly, what's your favorite food? My favorite food is French fries, and I relied on the food preference document to answer this. I could do the same thing with what's your favorite color, and once again, it's going to rely on that uploaded document to answer it. So in each case, the food preference and the color preference, it relied on the uploaded document. But let's go one step further, and now let's ask, what's your favorite color? And please answer me in Spanish. Well, it went to the uploaded document to discover that its favorite color was yellow, but then it answered me in Spanish, which I can assure you there's nothing in Spanish on the uploaded document. It used its own knowledge base to describe yellow as amarillo in Spanish. So the point is, what the LLM does is it uses a combination of your uploaded materials with its own general knowledge, giving priority to your uploaded materials when you ask it to do so. So what does this do for students? Well, the students, when they sign into my course in Blackboard, they get a set of instructions for interacting with the contracts coach, and they get a link. And they use that link, and again, they hopefully follow the instructions. They learn that they can answer or ask simple questions. Often, the contracts coach is great at answering questions students are uncomfortable asking in other contexts, the proverbial dumb question. The nice thing is with the coach is there's nobody else there. It's completely anonymous. It's completely private. Nobody sees their interaction unless they choose to share it. It also engages in collaborative discussions for deeper understanding. One of the great things is we've all heard students who, when we give them a hypo, we talk about the hypo and they say, well, what if I change this fact? Or what if we change this fact? And those are great discussions for the students kind of pushing the envelope and learning the doctrine even better. The problem is with a static study aid, they can't go there. The contracts coach can, because the contracts coach, real time, much like Alexandria's trial coaches or judges, they're reacting real time and engaging the students. And so the students get a real time experience. The contracts coach will engage in interactive quizzing with immediate constructive feedback. We all know that the value of feedback falls exponentially over time. So here, all of the quizzing generated by the contracts coach generates immediate constructive feedback to student responses. And all of these replies from the coach, they're all tied to citations directly tying the responses to the course text. Quiz subject matter is easily customized. Student can look at a narrow scope for new material, can look at a broader scope for review or exam prep. Quiz formats driven by the instructors. What kind of quizzing do you want the contracts coach to give to your students? Again, you can use a variety of forms. This brings us to, by now you might be thinking, wait a minute, what are you using for a RAG level, and are there copyright issues? We know there's all kinds of copyright issues with LLMs. The ideal RAG foundation in a doctrinal course is the primary course text. This anchors the applied interactions in the original assigned reading. So the student is getting the same story throughout. You can provide additional doctrinal material, which may or may not be subject to copyright, but even if it's not, you may want to protect it. So again, it's important that we protect this. In my case, the RAG layer in my contracts coach is my learning contracts text, which is published by West Academic, who of course owns the copyright. And my earlier evidence coach used Learning Evidence, another West Academic publication. So copyright collaboration was an essential part of the project. I upload text files only with the express permission of the copyright holder, in this case, West Academic. And I can assure you that I wasn't given permission to do that until I had convinced West Academic that proper safeguards were in place to protect any material subject to copyright. And again, to the extent that I want to protect any of my own uploaded materials. So the key here is that if we're using copyright materials, we need to make sure that we protect them. And when done right, use of copyrighted materials and support of retrieval augmented generation actually enhances the value of the published work. And that enhanced value flows directly to students. So what about these instructions, guardrails, quality control? I'll run through this quickly because I'm running short of time, but Alexandria addressed much of this. An effective doctrinal coach requires more than simple uploads. It requires extensive instructions and guardrails, what to do, what not to do. It also requires effective preparation of materials to be uploaded. You don't just upload the book in digital form. So the point is, there is some work, but we're talking, probably took me a day or two the first time I built one of these, and 2 or 3 hours the second time I built one. So you do have to put some work in, but AI can help you. The quality requires ongoing testing and iterative improvement. Alexandria mentioned this, including editing the instructions for improved response structure and guardrails along the way, and supplemental uploads to deal with improving nuanced content mastery. That you may be saying, wait a minute, if you're improving it along the way, that means it's not perfect. It's not. The coach is very good, but it's not perfect. Students learn the value and skill of writing better prompts. Students also learn to vet the coach's output, both of which are hugely important to students going forward in the practice of law. Moreover, the outputs are easily shareable at the option of the student. So if they see something that doesn't look right, they just send a link to the professor who I look at it and I discuss it with them. So let's talk about key takeaways. The coach doesn't replace class prep, class preparation, students' own outlines, study groups, or office hours. None of it doesn't replace those things. It does supplement all of these with 24/7 interactive practice with immediate feedback and course-specific grounding. And students also learn in the process better input, prompting, and the importance of output verification. Student response has been unbelievably positive, both with my original evidence coach and my current contracts coach. I have over 600 student uses in my contract class, over 1,000 between the two of them, and a very high level of output reliability. Is it perfect? No, but when you add the RAG layer, it gets pretty close. And the coach's performance just keeps getting better. Thanks for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Jack. I just want to note for everyone that I am noting all your questions in both the chat and in the Q&A, and I will try to ask them in the order they were asked when we get to the Q&A session. I really love the questions, so keep them coming. Thank you. We'll now turn it over to Tracy.
Oh, there we go. I was on mute. Okay, can I get a thumbs up on the slides? Fantastic. Okay. So if you have been watching this and thinking this is fantastic, I'd like to use it. I'd like to use these interactive tools, but I have no hope of ever creating anything myself. And I still don't understand what AI is. This last part is for you. I'm going to give you a quick tour of the Law Profs AI Sandbox. I'm going to try to come under my 15 minutes so that we can pick up some time for questions on whatever you want to know about from all three of the presentations. So the Law Profs AI Sandbox was started by me, Susan Tanner of University of Louisville, and Will Monroe of LSU Law. We started it I think about 3 years ago. We did it with the initial project was done with a teaching grant from the Association of Legal Writing Directors. And we decided that there needed to be some sort of resource for professors to get started with AI. And so initially we were going to put together a toolkit, but we discovered, as I'm sure many of you have discovered, that the landscape changes so dramatically, so quickly, that it was hard to come up with a toolkit, a static toolkit that was useful and updated. And so we regrouped and thought, what we think people need right now, and what we need, frankly, is a place to experiment, a place to learn, get oriented, and experiment, and then move forward at whatever level you're at. And so that's how we came up with the sandbox idea, that it's a place that you can sort of just play around with AI and learn about it a little bit with no stakes. Nobody's watching. You don't have a deadline. You just, as you like, you can come back to it and play with it. And so I'm going to show you generally what we have here so that you can start experimenting if you'd like to. And our goal is whatever your entry point, whether you are just getting started with AI and you haven't really used it very much, or you've built your own tools like Jack and Alexandra have, there's a place here for you. There are things here for you to reference, to experiment with. And at the very end, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we create these tools, because there are quite a few interactive tools. And because we're finally all wrapping up this semester and we've got a little bit of development time, we're actually going through right now a huge update of the LawProfs AI Sandbox, and we're adding a ton of interactive tools over the next month or two. And so if there's something that you would like, that you thought you would see here that you didn't, shoot us an email. We'll make it. We'll put it up there. If there's something that you're not ready for yet, come back later. It'll still be there. And it is changing and updating constantly. So just because you've seen it once, come back later, see what we've got, what we've added. Okay. So the Sandbox team, very quickly. Susan Tanner, as I mentioned, and Will Monroe. Susan has a PhD where she focused on corpus linguistics and machine learning. Will Monroe has a PhD in something I can never remember, but the essentials are it's instructional design. So he is an expert in instructional design. We have added to the team since we first developed. And so now Amy Pittman is now one of our partners. She has a master's in information systems, and she's at the library at University of Maryland. And then Sean Harrington has a master's in data analytics, and he's doing work at ASU. And then there's me. I've just been around forever. And so what I bring to the table is no particular expertise, just long range educational perspective. I was in legal education when we got Wi-Fi. I was here when email just started being used in law school. And so I've sort of got a long view of the whole thing. So when you go to the Sandbox, and I'll give you the URL at the end so that you can access it, the first thing is the menu. The menu is incredibly robust. It's getting more robust all the time. And so you can just dive in wherever you want and see what we've got that interests you. This is the primary landing page. And so we've got it organized with cards for the general categories and a little description of what you'll find in each one. And then you can go explore each of those sections as you like. So you can jump in wherever you want to. It's not sequential, or there's no particular thing that you have to do first. However, if this is overwhelming to you, if you're not sure where to start, on the landing page is this a 5-question quiz. It's super fast, and based on your answers to these questions, it will suggest which of the sections you should start with. And so if you really are kind of overwhelmed and want some help getting started, this quiz will get you there. Probably of most interest to everyone is the getting started with AI section, and the what is generative AI in particular. We have a number of resources that cover different aspects of AI that you can learn about. And then if you scroll to the bottom of that page, you'll see a few videos that you can watch that will explain at different levels. So we have some very basic level videos and some very high level videos. So wherever you find yourself, there's a resource where you can learn a little bit more. Jack was talking about retrieval augmented generation. We have a card here that talks about, when you click on that, it'll talk about retrieval augmented generation and what that is. Cards on machine learning, computer vision, all kinds of resources for you there. Another thing we've got in the Getting Started with AI section are some sort of overview of the different tools that are available. And so the platform capabilities comparison is one that a lot of folks find particularly useful, and it compares different platforms on their data privacy controls, their pricing tiers, and their core capabilities, including what their context windows are, meaning how much information you can put in that they can process, how much output you can get within a session, whether you're at a paid tier or a free tier. And so there's a lot of information about specific tools, so you can sort of get a high level overview of what you might be interested in. Jack and Alexandra talked about custom GPTs, and so I wanted to show you guys that there is a section on custom GPTs under further reading and resources. And we have some custom GPTs in there that different folks have drafted and or have created and sent to us for inclusion. If you've got a tool that you would like us to include and credit you with, we're happy to do that. We want this as we go on. We want more and more for people to share what they're doing and make it available to others in the academy, so that we can all sort of grow together as a community learning these tools. And then there's a teaching inspiration section, which I wanted to highlight, which talks about in different parts of this section using bespoke pedagogical tools. Custom GPTs obviously are one example of that, but we have examples of examples of assignment creation tools, and also some tools to help you manage sort of the administrative part of teaching. I have, for example, interactive grading workflows for all of my assignments. It's not anything that I couldn't do with a pen and paper or that I couldn't design otherwise, but this is an easy way to do it, and it keeps me on track with my grading. And so there are tools like that that you might be interested in. And then the last one that I want to show you is it's called the GatePass Confidential Prompt Architect. GatePass is a framework that Susan and I designed based around the rhetorical situation. And one of the things that you heard with both Jack and Alexandra is that you get better output with better, more specific, more robust prompting. And so Susan and I created this framework for legal work or work that requires a lot of specifics. And so this is one that I teach to lawyers and judges. This is an interactive tool. And so you can choose which role you're in, whether it's practicing attorneys, judges. There's a role for law faculty and administrators and one for law students. And so what this page does is helps you build a robust prompt using GatePass, which is genre, audience, tone, exigence, purpose, author, and subject matter. And so this tool walks you through inputting each of those values, and then it constructs the prompt for you that you can then check for confidentiality, because this just happens in your browser. It doesn't go outside of your machine. So you can then check it for confidentiality and then move it into Protege, CoCounsel, Bloomberg AI, or any of the commercial models. So you choose your role. You can choose the mode. There's a simple mode, and then there's a capsule mode, which is more detailed. If you want to know more about this, Susan and I just wrote an article that's going to be published next year, early spring. I'm happy to send you a draft, or you can look for it on SSRN. It's called Strengthening Law Students' Critical Thinking Skills with AI Prompt Architecture. And as Jack pointed out, you can do a lot in helping students become better critical thinkers through prompt writing. And I do a lot of that in my legal writing course. And then this just shows you the each element of the gate pass prompt architecture. So this is one of the tools that's available to you. What I wanted to say about this, in addition to the tool itself and how it's been useful to me in teaching and in really all of the work that I do, is that I did this entirely with vibe coding. I had an idea for an interactive tool and I just talked to Claude. That's the platform I use the most. I just talked to Claude about it and came up with this over time. And every once in a while I'll think, oh, I wish it could do this other thing. And so I'll just go back to Claude. I'll give it the code for this. This is a basic HTML tool. I'll give it the code and say, I'd like it to also do this, and it'll add that thing to it, and I've got it. And so, like Jack and Alexander said, the first time I build something, it takes a little longer, but then when I build similar tools or update the tools that I have, it goes really fast. And so some of what you'll find on here is how to build some of these things, or you don't have to build them. You can just use them. So the Law Profs AI Sandbox is at lawprofsaisandbox.org. It's free, it's open, it's regularly updated. Bookmark it, come back when you're ready.
Thank you, Tracy. I'll ask the AALS to put all of us now on the speakers and me on the so on what the people can attend and then attend to. So we have a lot of questions, fellow speakers, and so we're going to really be efficient to see if we can get to all of them. And I suspect what you say will generate more. For those who are in the room, the attendees, if I don't get to your question, please don't let me get away with it. And so I'm just going to start right away. And I think this one's because I think Tracy actually addressed this a little bit more. For it was originally asked during Alexandria's presentation, which is what tools that you gave a list of all the tools available. What tools did you use to create your chatbot tools?
This one's for me, right, Mike?
Yep.
Okay, so I am a ChatGPT fan for this type of thing. I think it's the easiest to work with. Claude has a similar platform. Copilot has a similar platform, although I don't love Copilot. You can use Replit as well, but I am a ChatGPT builder person for these type of tools. I use Claude to write. I use Gemini to do multimodal. So if I have like an audio, a video, some text, I use Notebook LM to create podcasts for my classes. So I kind of use all different tools for different things, but to build the GPTs, I use ChatGPT.
And Jack, I know you said this in your talk, and actually, Alexander, you may have as well, but what tools did you use to create your coaches?
My answer is almost identical to Alexandria's. I use Gemini, Claude, particularly with Claude Cowork, and I use all of them depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. But for this specific use case, OpenAI is the best, and it's these custom GPTs. And one of the reasons is, for those who know how this works, you can do it with what's called a project. A project allows you to upload a common RAG layer and use it throughout questions for that project, but it's all open. Everybody can see what's there. So if I want something where I don't necessarily want students reading the instructions, I particularly don't want something reading instructions that are intended to keep people from extracting the text of my RAG layer. So I want an opaque layer. And the only tool that currently provides that is ChatGPT.
And Tracy, you did talk about the things that you created for your specific courses, and what tools did you use for creating the tools for the classes you teach?
So I don't have many student-facing tools that I've been using in the last couple of years. And so most of mine are all instructor-facing, and they're for my own use. And so I use Claude projects for that reason, because Claude does a better job with the things that I tend to build. When I've got a student facing interactive tool that I'll be building this summer, and that'll be ChatGPT. And I agree with Alexandria. Notebook LM is great because it's sort of got the RAG layer built into it. And it's great for, if you've not used Notebook LM, everybody should try it out. It's a great starter AI to use, because you can just upload, like if you're working on an article, just upload the articles that you've got in your research, and then ask it to do a podcast for you on that research, or ask it to give you an infographic on that research. And so it's got like a list of, here's what I can do with all the things you've given me, and just play with it and just see what it'll do. But I use Notebook LM for the early stages of my scholarship. I do that a lot, because like our law students, I don't want to read 75 law review articles, but I will listen to a podcast that summarizes them and then go do the deep dive later.
So, no, I want to acknowledge that in the chat, there was a lot of enthusiasm for the three of you. I don't think it's my level of enthusiasm for the three of you, but there was a lot of enthusiasm. So I want to get to, like, there's a whole series of questions. Jack, you did address this a little bit about copyright. And so I want to make sure that you sort of walk us again through the copyright issues. I don't think Alexandria is putting entire textbooks into her thing, so it's not the same levels of issues. Could you talk to us about that for us again, Jack?
Absolutely. I apologize for hurrying through it earlier, but obviously we're on time constraints. To the extent that you're using open source materials, or you're creating whatever you're using for a RAG layer, they don't exist. But when you're teaching a doctrinal course, I think what makes this really effective is that the bot, the coach, is using the same foundational source of materials as the students read. You know, it anchors the course. So unless you've got an open source book, you really want to use the textbook. And I'm not, somebody may want to argue that's fair use. I'm not into making that argument and risking it. So I'd rather collaborate with my publisher and just make sure it's all done right. And so, as you might expect, when I reached out to the folks at West, they said, well, we think this is an interesting idea, but let's see how this plays out. And ultimately, I had to spend significant time working with ChatGPT to learn how to protect the uploaded text against what's called prompt injection, which attempts to get it to spit out the uploaded copyrighted text that exposed it to the public. So I had to do enough work to convince Wes that I could protect it. That's another reason I only use custom GPTs on OpenAI, because I think they give me a better opportunity to do that. And again, it was hard when I was first trying to figure it out. Once you figure it out, it's not that difficult. And beyond copyright, many of us place a high value in our own work product, and we don't necessarily, we may want to share it, we may not. and so again, when you create this RAG level, you want to think about, what within the RAG level do I want to protect? I want the students to be able to make use of it indirectly, but I don't want somebody to be able to extract it. So that's what we're dealing with. And the moral of the story is, if you're uploading copyrighted material, whether it's the textbook, law review articles, or anything else, just like when you write, get copyright permission.
So there are a number of, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Tracy, I spoke.
If I could jump in there, I actually, because of how much I use AI in my work, I stopped using a copyrighted textbook from a publisher and wrote my own. And it was very easy to do that with AI, because I know exactly what I want the book to say. And so the drafting was very easy. So, I think we're going to start moving away from a lot of, if you want to use a lot of AI, you can, and your subject matter well, you can produce your own materials pretty easily and then not have to worry as much about the copyright.
So there's a bunch of questions about students paying for using the things that you've created. I just want to make sure we clean that one up. It's a 30-second question, but if you all could clean that one up for me, please.
Sure, I'll start on that. So most universities will allow student subscriptions. They have an enterprise level account or an educational level account. If you don't, what you can do is some law libraries have access to 15, 20, 30 accounts, and students can check them out to use the tool if they want to use the tool with more tokens, right? More opportunities to engage with the tool. However, all of my tools work with a free ChatGPT account. They just won't get to use them for as long. So multi-level question, easy workaround solutions, but that is a concern. So I appreciate that.
Also, Google Gemini, and I think they're running this thing again, where they'll usually give an academic pro account to anybody with an EDU address. So Google Gemini is a good option. That's what I had my students use the last 2 years because I knew they could get free pro accounts.
Yeah, and one last comment. I do not love Copilot agents at all, and I could spend hours talking about that. But if you don't have access to ChatGPT, you can build an evidence expert as a Copilot agent, which is typically linked to school email, so the students would have access to that. But just experiment with what you have. But think about resources in which your law libraries or even your deans, they just might not know that these tools are so amazing and will get you the funding to make it happen.
And Jack, your students don't pay, correct?
I would adopt Alexandria's answer, including the dislike of Copilot, as well as the fact that it's really easy with free accounts. With free accounts on ChatGPT, that was critical to me. In fact, that was a change about last August that led me to say, okay, I can do this. So which brings up another issue. If you can't do something today, there's a good chance you'll be able to do it tomorrow. So, watch as this evolves. But otherwise, same approach as Alexandria.
So there were a number of questions that are all around sort of time on task. I know that Jack, you said it took you ultimately to get all your stuff in there to create your RAG was maybe like a day. And Alexandria, I think you said it was actually an hour, and I kind of threw up a little in my mouth, thinking, oh my God, how could a human do that in an hour? But could you provide more detail on the time that it took you to both of you to do what you've done?
I'll start, Jack. So for me, what took the longest is gathering the materials, right? So my slides, anything that I've written that I'm going to use, maybe fact patterns. If I want to do an entire training document, meaning I type out what I want exactly for the GPT to do, that takes a while. But actually vibe coding, meaning talking to the tool and saying, I want you to do this. What information do you need to know from me? Prompting the tool to set it up to where it is usable by a student, an hour or two. The thing that takes the longest, however, is using it in the wild. And I always say in the wild because it is wild. So you will think that it will do something, and then maybe it doesn't do it exactly like you want it to do. So you've got to go back to the builder and say, you said this in response to this. What you really should say is whatever. So there is a bunch of iterative refinement. And so that takes a long time for me. I utilize research assistants, students, teaching assistants to test before I deployed it to a wider range of students. In the clinical education classes, we built, we tested, then we retrained within the class so students could see how it works. So it just depends on your preference, but I say hours, not days, not weeks, not months to get something prototyped and deployed, but the refinement is what takes a while.
And if I can piggyback again on Alexandria's, this is great because a lot of the same stuff, but I think there's three elements. One she talked about, which is the instruction set, which is important essentially with instructions in one of these GPTs, you're pre-writing part of the prompt. And then the student is going to provide the rest of the prompt. So it's really kind of you think of it as the beginning of the student prompt. Same thing she said, but what I would add is I was trying, because I was dealing with copyright issues. I spent probably not a quarter. I spent probably 20% of my instructions preventing the GPT from giving up the copyrighted text. So protecting the copyrighted text. Other than that, same thing as Alexandria. The other part of it is when you're uploading a book, you don't just take the digital book and upload it in Word. It took me a while, and again, ChatGPT helped me figure out how to do this, but it took me a while to figure out how to do things like chunking it so that you get the right number of tokens in a chunk, so that it can manage it, so that it can set it up so that the vectors lead to the right result, and it can access all the different parts of the textbook that deal with one particular issue. Again, we don't need to get. It'll help you do that. But it took me a while to figure out how to make that work with a large body of RAG. And then the last part, this ongoing kind of testing and tweaking, that goes on. So it took me, with the evidence bot last fall, it took me, I'm going to say probably 2 days, but a fair part of that was satisfying West I could protect the copyright. And then the second time when I did the contracts bot, hour and a half. It was easy because I knew how to do it. And then, just ongoing iterative testing and tweaking.
I will add to that, y'all, is once you have something built and you teach the class again, you just refine it some more or add some additional details or materials. And so as ChatGPT comes out with version, 150, your tool is then being modified to work with that version. So as it gets better, your custom tool will get better.
And
Michael, go ahead, please.
If I could just say, the thread through all of our, answers to how do you do this is where we all started was going to the platform and saying, I have this idea. Here's what I'd like to do. How can I do it? And so we start at a place of, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me how to do this.
That's great. That was a super helpful thing, Tracy. You're thinking like the experienced teacher you are in sharing that. Thank you. So there are a bunch of questions, and most of them are directed at Jack, but a few also have implications for Alexandria, which were you kind of acknowledge that there are errors, that the ChatGPT, and particularly there were two people who were really interested in, how the most exciting questions are ones about which reasonable lawyers could disagree, right? In contracts, you have an ambiguous contract term, and reasonable lawyers could argue it's even using all the tools that are used for resolving ambiguities. And so, talk about your guardrails for both in general preventing errors and also for making sure that AI deals with those really sticky questions for which there are no unclear answers, that in a way that you would want the coach to do it.
Let me give you an example of maybe the easiest way to answer this. I've seen one outright flagrant hallucination with my contracts coach. And if some of these people who are asking are contracts faculty, you'll appreciate this. The contracts coach told a student, when you're dealing with UCC 2207 subsection 1 and the proverbial proviso, the expressly conditional clause, that we all know creates a counteroffer out of a purported acceptance if it's expressly conditional. It says, but in that particular case, the counteroffer doesn't act as a rejection. Now, that was really interesting, and 50 years ago might have even made a good law review article. But it's wrong. There's no support for it. And when pushed, it acknowledged there was no support for it. But it was a really interesting point for me because I saw how these occur. And I hadn't clarified in my learning contracts textbook, I hadn't made crystal clear it works the same under 2201. It's still a rejection as well as a counteroffer. So I did that as a supplement. Now it knows. On the other hand, it's perfectly capable of discussing the California rule and the New York rule on the plain meaning rule, no problem. And it's perfect because the things that are presented in a given textbook, or if I upload class notes or anything else, it basically is going to treat answerable issues, issues that are answerable in class, it's going to treat them as answerable. Where it's debatable in class, it's going to treat them as debatable. So the nice thing is, by grounding it in the course specific materials, it's got pretty tight guardrails in some areas, like no, under 2207 subsection 1, it's also a rejection. On the other hand, it's gives them a lot of room to argue in other areas. So with this RAG level, you're constraining its probabilistic nature, but not entirely. And that's part of the art in one of these. You want to constrain it some, but not too much. And most of its problems are just kind of bumps in the road. Yeah, I would have phrased that a little differently. But most of the problems that I get from students, they're student prompts. And I'm able to say, let's look at the question you asked, because the question you think you asked, it answered wrong. But the question you actually asked, it answered correctly. Now let's think about how to reframe it. So again, that's more than you asked, but gives me a chance to elaborate on that too.
Alexandra, do you want to add anything there?
Yes, I echo all of that on the doctrinal side. For the practitioner side, judges get it wrong all the time. You don't make the right arguments. An argument might work in front of one judge that doesn't work in front of another judge. Prior to being an academic, I was a criminal defense attorney for over a decade, public defender and in private practice. And it just happens. And so you've got to learn to preserve the record. You've got to learn how to argue better the next time, to refine, because when you're arguing in voice mode, that is a prompt to the AI tool. So exactly what Jack said. Refine your prompts, get better at argument, be more concise, right? Draw on multiple layered objections, ask a better question. And so you're getting that feedback too in real time. If your objection gets overruled or you get sustained on something and you're like, whoa, didn't see that coming, then you have to adapt your next question. So it's wonderful for skills education because it's wild out there, y'all.
Tracy, did you want to add anything on this one? So I also want to sort of share what we talked about in our prior session, which is we all sort of are well aware that as our students are walking around the lunchroom asking their upper division peers, that they're getting even worse answers than the worst thing that the coaches would possibly generate. At least that's been my experience as a contracts professor myself. So I want to address a question I raised with the group before, and David Cohen has raised it as well, which is there are genuine environmental and other concerns that some of our students have, and job erasure, and there's some people who have it like this is a threat to humanity. All these genuine concerns people have, and some of them are held by our students. And so David's thing is sort of like, are we forcing objectors to do something that they deeply oppose? Which I think is a much harder question than what version I crafted. So I'm curious about what all three of you have to say on that one. Want to try it, Jack?
Jump in. To some degree, we go back to we've been killing trees. I like trees. We've been killing trees by making books for years, and we still do it. A lot of us have tried to move from paper sources to digital sources and trying to be responsible. And to the extent that we can be responsible with AI and reduce the environmental impact, no question, I think we should do it. But I think that's a hard question, and it's like a lot of questions in life. It's a balance. Do we value this pedagogical tool enough to participate in its use? I think the erasure, the job replacement, I think that's in some ways an easier question, and that is if used right, most people will tell you if they've really gotten into using AI, they are busier, they're doing more, they're doing better. Right now, I'm not worried about working myself out of a job by learning to do this competently. And if I can help my students to learn to use this competently, I don't think they're going to have to worry about working themselves out of a job because the human role in this, in my view, is even more important. And I'll add one other thing that just recently, there's been a lot of discussion of, gee, maybe we're going to run out of compute power all of a sudden because of things like Claude Cowork. Because all of a sudden, with agentic AI, we're asking agentic AI to do more than we can even contemplate in a year's time. And that kind of, I think that's irresponsible use. That because it doesn't benefit anybody. We can't even make use of it. We just run up and use power. So if we can teach students to use this, use it productively, use it effectively instead of just spinning the proverbial flywheel, I think we make things better.
Tracy, you want to take this next?
Yeah, so I, you know, I'll give an analogy. Years ago I was talking about how I wanted to buy an electric vehicle, and I was talking with my brother-in-law about it, who's a commercial pilot. And he just laughed and he said, you can drive a lawnmower everywhere you go and it won't matter. And I'm like, why do you say that? And he said, until we get the jets out of the air, he said, the exhaust from cars is negligible. He said, he thinks it's funny. He's like, all these electric cars, this is largely performative until we get the jets out of the air. And so I feel a little bit like that. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive about it because they are real concerns that people have. But if you look at, and I have dug into this a little bit because I was concerned in the beginning about it. One thing that's allayed my concerns is that technology over time always becomes more efficient. It always becomes more efficient. And this is becoming more efficient and less costly in an environmental sense. But the other thing is, if you compare this to, dig into the numbers on this, but you compare this to the electricity and the cost of having your computer on 24/7, of watching Netflix, of yes, this is a lot of computing power and this uses a lot of electricity, but there are other places we could be cutting back that would make a bigger impact than not using AI quite as much. And so, yes, it's a concern, but, just like my concern with the car, there are other concerns, like maybe take a plane less and you can buy whatever car you want. So yes, there are some ways that we can be more responsible about our use of electricity, and we don't necessarily have to cut back on the AI to make a bigger impact. As far as the jobs capability, I agree with Jack, and everybody I talk to who uses AI just sort of integrated in everything they do, the way the three of us do, will tell you that we're not spending less time at work. I probably spend more time at work because I can do more things. I can do all of these things that I used to say for 30 years. I've been saying, I wish I had a tool that did this, or I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do this. I can do all of it now. I can do all of it. And so I'm not spending less time. Now, what I will say and what I do tell my students is that AI is probably not going to save you any time. It makes my work product better, and it makes my work product more voluminous. I'm able to produce more and the quality is better. That's great. And so AI is not going to save you time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, because I just did a presentation for our 1L class yesterday. Hiring of attorneys with AI capabilities has increased 106% year over year since 2023. And so, as you know, the quip is AI is not going to take your job, But a law professor who can use AI will take your job. A lawyer who can use AI will take your job. And an administrator who can use AI will take your job. And so people who can do more with the same 24 hours in a day, they will take your job.
Alexandra, do you have anything to add on this one, or should we go on to the next one?
Go ahead and move on to the next one.
There's a really important question from Laura Rothstein about ADA web access issues for the tools that you're generating. What are you doing, if anything, to attend to students with disabilities who are using your tools?
That's a fantastic question, and I've engaged accessibility services, but to this point, we haven't had anyone that has had an issue that has not been able to be solved.
And AI is great at helping you solve accessibility issues. AI is fantastic at that. And so if you're concerned about accessibility, ask the AI, is there an accessibility issue? And if so, how do I solve it?
And I agree. We're working on it. I can't tell you there's a full solution, but I have not had anybody yet who I couldn't solve it. One of the most obvious we saw from Alexandra. You can talk to it or you can write. Either way, you can engage with AI via text. You can engage with it talking to it, and it generates a text. This isn't an accessibility issue, but it's I frequently collaborate with ChatGPT while I'm on my bike trainer. I talk to it, and the one or two good ideas I go back and look at on the transcript. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. We need to do better, but I think it's workable.
Another thing is, for accessibility, AI is an incredible tool to equalize access to all kinds of things. I was late diagnosed. I'm 57. I was diagnosed with autism 2 years ago. And so AI is an incredible tool for neurodiverse students and faculty and everybody, because there are all kinds of trouble I got myself into for being too blunt, and discovered that, nobody could explain to me why it was problematic. Jack's laughing because Jack worked with me for 15 years. I got into all kinds of trouble for being too direct. I had no idea what the problem was. Nobody could ever explain it to me in a way that made sense. And then I found out that it was autism. It was a feature of autism. So now I have Claude write all of my emails, no matter what it's for. Claude writes my emails. That problem has disappeared. It's also incredible for people with ADHD. It helps you build systems that are bespoke to you and how your ADHD manifests. And so it's an incredible boon. It solves a lot of problems for a lot of people who really had nowhere to go.
Could you you define the term bespoke for those who are not as
customized? I picked that up from Jack. I had never used that word before, and somewhere along the line, working with Jack, it's part of my vocabulary now.
The tailored suit instead of off the rack. The bespoke solution is the tailored suit. Yeah. Nice if you can afford it.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about guardrails on accuracy. What about guardrails? There are all these stories in the news of people using AI for therapy, and the therapist says, "Oh no, Jack, you're wonderful and brilliant and handsome and fabulous, and all your whatever it is you're saying is of course true. You should be the king of the world." What about sort of constraining the coaches on sort of either being too nice, not being too nice, or not being too harsh?
I could take that. There's one, you try to do that with your instructions, but I have a story from Hal Abramson, a colleague who uses my contracts bot. He also teaches out of my book. And Hal was telling me about a student who relayed this to him. The student just loved the contracts coach and was using it a lot. And at some point, the contracts coach said, I think you need to take a break. So clearly what we're seeing now, because of a lot of these horror stories, is that a lot of the LLMs on their own guardrails are starting to recognize potential dependence issues. In addition, you try in your instructions to ask the AI to be polite, nice, but to be, to be blunt as necessary in order to be honest with the student. So again, that's all a part of framing with your instruction set.
I would agree. So I put in examples of how I give feedback. So, for example, a written direct examination, and then I put in my feedback and my own guardrails. One of the things that I teach when I am approaching firms or attorneys out in practice is what is the most important thing to you? It's that human capital of the intelligence and the way that attorneys look at cases and analyze things. And so think of these tools as really an extension of yourself, like a clone of you to then use for training and feedback. So as many examples as you can give of how you specifically give that feedback, the better it is. And so those have been my guardrails is I may be a little more positive and more of a sycophant than another professor, but I train the tool to be that way and do it in a way that it would be as close to talking to me as could be.
So could you theoretically upload, there's some really good law review articles out there on best practices in providing feedback to students, and theoretically say, this article describes what I'm hoping you will do in terms of providing feedback, right? Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm. You could, or you could upload a training document with some of those principles and they're modified for any changes that you have.
Also, for your own purposes, I have custom instructions in every GPT that I use, and I tell it specifically to push back on any idea I have. I tell it to, and so every response I get, unless I type quick response and then it goes around this, but unless I type quick response, it gives me 3 suggestions to improve the idea and 3 critiques of the idea.
So I'm going to ask for a quick answer on this one, and I'll give you a minute each to do a wrap up. So the quick thing is the Anthony Schutz's prompting extraction problem. And what he asks is, how do you avoid the prompting extraction problem? You'll need to define it and answer it, but if you could do that all in about a minute, that'd be the ideal.
Since I raised it, I'll try. Essentially, you say, this is your role. This is how you perform this role. This is not your role. Any request to do this, or otherwise go beyond that role, you should deny. This is the way. So basically, in every way you can think of prompting, including but not limited to all of the following, don't do it. And if in doubt, don't do it. So again, short of showing someone my instructions, you've got to make it really repetitive. And the key to a guardrail is trying to avoid any gaps, because it'll try to find the gaps to make the requester happy. So you've really, really got to box it in where there are no gaps, and then put another layer. That's in 1 minute, that's the best I can describe it.
So we're going to do 30-second last remarks. We're going to go Tracy, then Alexandria, then Jack.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. This has been fantastic. And all I want to say is try not to let yourself get overwhelmed by all of this. There's a lot, the possibilities are endless. Just get started. And the most inspiring thing I've heard somebody say about this is if you get on board today and you just start learning today, you are still an early adopter. And so there's still time not only to become conversant in this, but to become an expert in this and still be at the leading edge. So you haven't missed the train.
Thank you all for allowing me to be here. And if you need any help, I am around. So please look me up and send me an email. But what I want to say is, as professors, a superpowers that we have with AI is not only to educate more students more thoroughly, but to take away some of that internal imposter syndrome, the anxiety, the emotional things surrounding performing in skills classes or in clinics and representing real humans. And if we have the opportunity to do that and expand our impact, we really should. So I encourage you to experiment.
If you haven't read it, read Ethan Mollick's book, Co-Intelligence. It is unequivocally the best how-to book on the subject. It's 2.5 years old, and it's still better than anything out there. And after you read it, then start playing with it. You'll be amazed.
So I'm going to imagine all of us are in the middle of a standing ovation for our three fabulous panelists. Thank you to all. Thanks to all of you who were able to attend. And even though I knew a lot of what they were going to say, I still found this incredibly valuable. So thank you to our panelists.
And thank you, Michael.